last episode of season 8, Constable Crabtree is arrested for the murder of his fiance's previous husband. He didn't know that she was still married. She thought he was dead, and it all led to murder. So from that point on, we decided that we'd jump ahead a few months in time and start season 9 with addressing the Crabtree dilemma.
Copper. One of these days when their backs are turned, huh? You're the copper. Who wants to know?
Well, Crabtree's got himself in a whole lot of hot water, and he's reluctant to tell Detective Murdoch, or anyone else for that matter, what's going on. It's clear that everything isn't, face value, so our heroes have to sort of band together to come up with a solution. And it doesn't seem like Constable Crabtree is too willing to have that happen.
Tell me where she is. Who? The one whose husband you're doing time for killing. Why are you looking for her? It's not just me. If you care for her, you best let me find her first. Move apart.
We pick up where the pieces were left, and we find Constable Crabtree in prison, and he's actually approached by someone who's got some information on what really did happen that fateful night.
Crabtree has pleaded no contest to the murder charges that he faces at the end of the season, where his fiance's husband, who was supposed to be dead, is not dead. He's come back from the war, and then he ends up to be not a very nice man, and then he ends up killed. So was it Crabtree? Was it some third party from his life? These things are all swirling around.
So Edna Brooks went back to her apartment. Is that what you're suggesting?
It's possible.
You're clutching at straws.
Sir, they are all I have.
Bloody Crabtree, if you would just tell us where she was. I know he knows.
I've tried. He won't even see me.
He hasn't spoken out in his own defense. I guess a lot of people feel that he probably didn't do it. Well, I can't really give anything away.
It's good to see you, George.
Thank you for coming, sir.
What have you?
A man by the name of Julian Foster was killed in here yesterday. He was in the same regiment as Archibald Brooks.
How do you know that?
They share a regimental tattoo. And, sir, he told me he was to be released soon, and he was asking Edna's whereabouts. I think she might be in danger. He's very conflicted. He doesn't want to let down Murdoch or the inspector. He doesn't want to go to jail either, but he knows that if Edna's charged with the crime, whether she did it or not, it's her. She's been with another man while her husband is off to war. So he's trying to keep her out of hot water, and he knows that this guy's been abusive to Edna and Simon.
Our characters are obviously going on a journey, so there will be some character evolution in terms of what they're doing and what's going on in their lives. There will be some changes this year in terms of people. There'll be some new additions. We'll be bringing back some of our favorites.
We have a number of continuing stories this year. We're mindful that a Murdoch audience, as well as being an audience of the characters, is also an audience that's very fond of the mysteries. So we are spending a lot of time this year coming up with what we think are clever mysteries and weaving our characters' personal lives through it.
I think that the characters are kind of addictive. I think that's what it comes down to. I know that's what happens when I get into a show. You start to really like the people. Of course, we have these great storylines which never seem to disappoint, but the through line of all the emotional connections and these quirky characters and the intrigue of the past and real history and historical characters, it's kind of a winning show all around.
We err a little bit on the side of the fantastical, but that just opens up so many more possibilities.
The premise of Mark Twain is just to do what Murdoch does every season, bring in a famous historical figure and have some fun with them. And Mark Twain was doing speaking tours of the world at the time and actually become something of an anarchist or a liberal or a free spirit. He seemed like a natural fit. William Shatner came to our attention through a series of tweets that Yannick and Mr. Shatner started engaging in.
Mr. Twain, welcome to Canada.
Well, it was a robust one.
Yes. A fan suggested to Bill, said, "Hey, William Shatner, when are you going to do an episode of Murdoch Mysteries?" And I was included in that. And then he replied, "I don't know." And I thought, there's an opening. It sounds kind of positive, so I retweeted it. And then he immediately replied, and he goes, I saw that. I then got an email right away to the gang and said, let's get on top of this and try and make this happen. And then it did.
Mr. Twain, it's an honor to meet you.
Well, the honor is both yours and mine.
I guess maybe the biggest star that we've had. I mean, as far as international, any nook and cranny of the world you'd go to, they'd know who William Shatner is.
I've got hundreds of creditors on my back.
Are any of those creditors from Toronto?
Plus, you don't think...
Two main motives for murder, Mr. Twain. Love and money.
It's just different character. Worked on the accent. He was tall and thin and had bushy gray hair, and I don't, and I'm not. It's an impression, I guess. The only evidence we have of his existence, except for his writings, of course, are his pictures. We don't have a recording of him. We don't know how he spoke. He was a Southern gentleman, I think theatrical, so that these large personalities, when you meet them, are just ordinary human beings, but they get on stage and they become something else. You know, when you've lived as long as I have, you have the right to change your mind. And that's what I'm going to do here tonight. I'm going to change the minds of those of you who believe that women should not have the right to vote.
You can't take your eyes off him when he's doing a scene. He's so charismatic. We shot a scene a couple of days ago where he addresses Ogden's group of suffragettes, and he reads this little short thing that he's written. 9 takes into the day. You just watch him read it every time. It's great.
I wouldn't say I was a Trekkie by the definition. I was always a fan of William Shatner's, absolutely. I grew up watching the show as a boy, and then watching him and watching the cast as an actor.
My sister was a total Trekkie, and she had control of the television most of the time. So I watched a lot of Star Trek as a child.
The first movie I ever saw in the theater, my dad took my brother and I to The Wrath of Khan. I'm a huge fan, and it wasn't a real stretch as far as an acting job, because you do a scene with him and you're sort of like, holy cow, it's William Shatner, and the heart rate rises a little bit, and the sweaty palms maybe, and I hope I don't screw up, and I think that's probably how Crabtree would have felt.
I think everybody was a fan of Star Trek, certainly as a part of my growing up. Kirk, McCoy, Spock, and that were, a part of my life. I think a larger-than-life figure, William Shatner, playing a larger-than-life figure, Mark Twain, is indeed right for the role.
Take it from me, son. Reality can be beaten with enough imagination. Go to it.
It's a bittersweet thing. The last couple of weeks have been my lasts of everything, last drive here, last set on location. I've been counting all of them. It's a bit emotional day just because it's saying goodbye to a person that I've known and played for so long.
Dr. Grace.
I wanted to apologize for my abruptness earlier.
Oh, it's not necessary. You lost somebody close to you, I understand.
Any progress with the case?
Not worth mentioning, but we're working diligently.
You don't always get to work with amazing people. You don't always get to work with a great cast of people who are kind and supportive and a lot of fun. That would be the main thing that I will miss. The other thing that I will miss is reading scripts and finding out what's next for your character.
Certainly we'll miss writing for her. We'll miss writing scenes for George and Emily together, even when they weren't in a relationship. That chemistry was still very much there. And in the back of our heads, we probably saw a moment in time down the road where we would have brought them back together, and we'll miss those scenes that will now never be written.
Doctor, approximately 4 months ago, Miss Moss was in desperate need of $400. Do you have any idea why?
No. Although she was quite anxious around that time, which would coincide with her pressing me to go to London. But that urgency seemed to pass.
Among other things, Georgina brought a lot of smiles and a tremendous amount of energy. She always, sort of lights up a room when she comes in. Just a great girl.
Do you think Lillian killed him, Detective?
There's a strong possibility.
I think they've told a lot of stories and aspects of Dr. Grace over the 5 seasons, and I, as a person, was much younger when I started, and it's been interesting watching my life and who I am change and my acting style change with Grace. The suffragette movement and that whole theme last year, and getting to work with so many wonderful female actresses was a blast, and also learning about that movement.
On the show, Dr. Grace, it's just so nice to have that chick friend, if you like, and so we don't have that dynamic anymore.
I think my favorite moments are the ones where I've had really nice, intimate scenes with each of the main cast. It's when it's not just about the case, there's those little, relationship moments between everyone.
I'm really going to miss Georgina. I really enjoyed my scenes with her. We didn't have many, but I quite enjoyed working with her. And obviously she's English, even though she's been in Canada a few years. We've got the same sense of humour, being Brits.
To England.
Yes, to England.
Cheers.
Cheers. Change will do you good, Doctor.
It's what Lillian would have wanted. That last scene really mirrored life and the show. They're my friends and they're my peers, and she's leaving and I'm leaving. I found it quite easy to get emotional because it felt very real, saying goodbye to Yannick and saying goodbye to everybody.
So, I suppose this is it.
I suppose it is. Thank you. It was kind of sad doing the scene where we see off Dr. Grace, Crabtree drops her off at Union Station. That was the last scene that she and I had together. I consider Georgina a close buddy of mine. She's a big goofball, but I'll miss her, yeah.
We thought it was really, really important that her last moments in Toronto be with Crabtree, with whom she's the closest and they have the history. I think the fans are going to be rightfully quite disappointed to see her go. All I can say to them is I hope that we gave them what they would perceive as a good send-off for Grace.
You have to let go, Emily.
But what if I don't want to, George? What if this is a mistake?
And that's what you need to find out.
Sorry, ma'am. I can come back later.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were my husband. We haven't met yet. Dr. Julia Ogden.
Rebecca James.
Rebecca James appears because I have a cleaner in the morgue, and she's probably been working there before I even had to return, because now I'm back in the morgue, which wasn't something I planned. When I arrive, we have this cleaner, and she says a few things to me over the weeks, which are really curious. She seems to know a lot about what I'm doing and has great insights.
Oh, no. Not another one of those statue murders.
Oh, you've been following the news?
I'm no sensationalist, Doctor, but the notion of encasing corpses, that would preserve every small detail. I would think it would make your job a bit easier.
Indeed, it does.
Julia Ogden is so friendly and nice to her, and she actually notices that Dr. Ogden is working on a case that's been highly publicized, and Rebecca's taken great interest in it, so she kind of gets excited and reveals some of her own cleverness. Dr. Ogden.
Oh, hello again, Miss James.
I'm very sorry. I will change my hours to better fit your work. I don't recall the previous coroner working quite so late.
No, don't let me disturb you. I'm just here to collect some papers.
I think that Ogden and Rebecca will be professional friends. I think that Ogden will probably be Rebecca's champion in a few instances. I think Rebecca will also prove to be very useful in the morgue.
I couldn't help noticing that this bone is at an odd angle.
Yes, it seems the poor fellow had a fracture that didn't heal properly.
I think that obviously playing a period piece, getting to dress up, getting to show audiences what it's like to be a woman and a woman of color in 1904 is really exciting.
You know anatomy?
A little. Bones are endlessly intriguing. But I should let you go. I think it's really, really important to have characters like Rebecca and characters of other ethnicities on a show, because that is very accurate to Canadian history. There was a population of African Americans in Toronto during that time period. And I think that not only does it enhance our understanding of our history, but it also gives a very different kind of representation on television that we don't actually get to see very often.
I believe they may have been murdered within minutes of each other.
So both alive at the same time and with the killer?
Yes, it seems they may have eaten together. I found the same stomach contents, including sulfonal.
Being in the Maury is challenging. I mean, it's a beautiful set, and all of that stuff is, very interesting. But it's hard work. It's complex. I'm very intricate in the way that I like to work. I really need to know what I'm talking about when I talk about it. I'm probably the only character that's got to change where I work and everything that I do very often. And for some reason, I have this great life where I get to work between different offices and then out in the fields.
What else?
He sustained 5 stab wounds. Look at this photo. According to the report, this is the fatal wound. The knife entered an oblique angle.
And that's a running theme throughout the show, that we love it when we get to work together. So there are many opportunities for us to do more of that now. They just make that a lot of fun when I have to get down and dirty with the bodies.
It's basically riffing on Dr. Strangelove. We realized that 1903 was the year in which the rocket was essentially invented. It's actually the first rocket. Pendrick invents the rocket. We try to have our feet in what is reality and then go from there. Obviously, nobody invented the rocket, but the technology, at least the idea of it, existed as early as 1903, and in fact, earlier.
Are you all right, Murdoch? We parachuted late.
I flew! I actually flew!
Yeah. It's quite something, isn't it?
Yes!
The launch tube and control room are over there.
I flew.
Having Peter Stebbings here is a real treat for me. We've known each other a really long time, and we have these two characters that are very simpatico, and so I think a lot of that translates onto the screen, so it's really enjoyable for me.
I think there's a mutual respect of intellect there. I think I admire him as a great mind, and I think he thinks the same, I think that he thinks, Pendrick is like one of these people who's on his level. We get along really well off camera. I think that translates definitely on screen.
It certainly isn't intended to carry an explosive.
What's it intended to carry, then?
Me.
You.
The intent of my invention is the exact opposite of war. I seek nothing less than to be an ambassador to a world beyond our own. The moon, Murdoch. I intend to go to the moon.
I think anytime we bring Pendrick back, it's a lot of fun and it allows for this fantastical quality. It gives us, a bit of creative license. We can do fun stuff. We can fly. There's that aspect of the show that's always present that I really, really enjoy.
When we finally got into who Pendrick was, he was originally going to be Murdoch's nemesis. In season 3, he was introduced. He was a man who was obviously a scientist like himself, kind of a Murdoch, only Murdoch thought he was an evil version of himself, and it turned out that he wasn't. And then in season 5, when we were thinking of doing the electric car, Pendrick seemed like the logical person who would invent an electric car, and that was a turn in the character. And from that point on, Pendrick was the guy who invented the technology years ahead of everyone else.
I think the subject we tackled with Pendrick that was the coolest was the electric car. And the truth of it is, it was around. As a matter of fact, there are working cars from the turn of the century that still work. That was a really symbolic, really important episode, I think, for our series.
My favorite invention was the electric car, predominantly because it was functional. I could get in there and race around, and it was super, super fun. I think we are kind of inspired by true events. In the turn of the last century, people were thinking about going to the moon. So I don't think it's that out there. I just think it was 69 years ahead of schedule.
We were thinking about an interesting way to get back into Murdoch's past. We did an episode in season 8 called Shipwreck, which was a little bit about how Murdoch came to be a detective. So we started thinking about an interesting way to bring a new character into the show and maybe someone who could bump against Murdoch here and there, and that turns out to be Winifred or Freddie Pink.
William Murdoch from Nova Scotia.
Yes, sir.
Hamish McTavish from Ontario.
That's me, Mr. Collins.
Where's Master Prince Edward Island?
I'm here.
You're Freddie Pink?
Winifred, actually. I knew it would stand a chance if I used my proper name.
It's fun to be able to go back in time and find out what, actually makes our hero tick and the things that shaped him and molded him. So being able to revisit something like summer camp and the different things that happened there, it's a lot of fun.
Look!
Stay back. Stay back.
What are you doing?
Helping you get him out.
You're not scared?
There's nothing to fear from the dead, sir.
It's a very delicate balance, and you have to make sure that the story in the past not only makes sense as a story unto itself, but also has some resonance in the story in the present.
I contacted the remaining participants of your trip back in 1875.
And?
Well, Seymour Bailey died from a heart condition 2 years ago. But Jacques Devereaux is still alive and living in Algonquin Park, your old stomping grounds. And it just so happens Edwin Clark is visiting him there now.
So Hamish is the only victim?
Not quite, sir. A Mr. Quinn Prue was shot and killed near Gravenhurst just a couple of months ago.
And of course, on Murdoch Mysteries, we always have a mystery, and that's always the story in the present that has to take the main part of the episode.
The best way I can describe that past segment that we're revisiting was that it was somewhat competitive. So you're talking about a bunch of scholars rammed together that were not necessarily friends or didn't necessarily get along and were from different socioeconomic backgrounds. So there is some tension there.
Definitely playing this character for a second time, it gets me more familiar with the character. It also, I think, gives an audience a lot more familiar with what he was like when he's growing up and how he became what Murdoch is and who he is today.
John Paul is a great kid, and actually we do look alike. If I look back at photos of myself, I do look like that. I had a little bit more red in my hair, though.
Last time was my first time, and now it's my second time, so I think I've gotten the grips of how to act in this character and what I should be like.
Oh, kid's a pro. He doesn't really need my help.
I definitely try to get some personal traits and characters out of him, maybe to put on action while I'm on set.
And I think to some extent there's a boy still in grown-up Murdoch.
Definitely, teens are different now in present day. First of all, there's not many electronics, that's just general, but the wardrobe is a lot different. You're basically out here in 40 degrees wearing 3 sets of wool clothing, and you may be dying a bit, but it's film business, and I definitely think that's different. I don't know how they survived.
We were thinking about worlds that we haven't yet done, and there are still a few, if you can believe it. And one of the ones that we'd been talking about, again, off and on over the years, was opium and an opium den. And we thought this is a great time to do it, so why don't we look into that? Opium in 1903 was legal, and it was fairly prevalent. There were Chinatowns all over North America, and here in Toronto, obviously, there were opium dens.
I need hardly tell you what to do next. Ling? Oh, there you are. Are we prepared?
It's just really interesting every time we deal with a new drug that back then didn't have the stigma that we have about it now. It was an interesting drug that was being discovered, and it's enjoyable to see how the world viewed things differently back then, for better or worse. Mr. Sutton died between the time he lit that pipe and when he was discovered 1 hour later, dead.
Then it's extremely fast-acting.
He also didn't seize, so we can eliminate strychnine. Hemlock is still an option. I think we've chatted about opium at different times, as we do with all of the other heroin and laudanum and all the drugs that were freely used legally at that time. So we love to drop that in. And this is really odd for a modern audience. We have so many ideas about drugs that didn't exist back then. So I don't think we've ever really touched on the way we do in this.
It's kind of interesting. I had a little bit of an injury last week, and I treated it with this ointment, and I was like, well, this is pretty good stuff. It really, really, really works. And I was looking at it, and it was based on TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. The same with the allergy stuff that I take, so I can get through the summers here. There's a lot to it, and it goes back so far. So the fact that we're able to discuss some of that in the show and sort of bring it to light to the mainstream is fun.
When we were talking about this in the writer's room, we all said this is the perfect opportunity for Murdoch and Ogden to smoke opium. Ogden would absolutely smoke opium, right? I mean, she'd be down with that. Murdoch would never. But now that they're married, you like to see a little bit of compromise in their relationship, and you like to see Ogden pulling Murdoch into things that he wouldn't normally do.
I wasn't surprised that Murdoch got to do opium, but it's always surprising when they take us to a place like that. The audience loves it, and it's also I think it's very real for who they are. They're both inquiring minds, and Julia likes to try things new, and she likes to drag Murdoch into them, so it makes sense to me.
I was a little shocked when when it came up in the script, Murdoch is going to smoke some opium. As he says, well, it's perfectly legal. And, he and Dr. Ogden have indulged in a couple things in the past just for, scientific mind expansion.